Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, so today is the third talks from Dr. Susanne M. Hoffmann, and today's topic is about future research in astronomy. So we could combine the astronomy and also the Islamic astronomy. Okay, ma'am, time is yours.
Thank you very much for this time, and thank you for being here attending this lecture. First, before I start, I was told that you are the graduate students, but I want to know what exactly you are. So, who of you is studying in the master for the magister? Okay, so that is the vast majority. Who is already studying for the PhD? Okay, only a few. And are those of you who are studying for the Magister, who of you plan to do a PhD after that? Everybody. So if they take me, then I'm willing. Okay. Okay, good. Great. So, okay, thank you. So, I assume that you all study Islamic astronomy, and that is why I am focusing on the future sort of direction that I can imagine on Islamic astronomy. But for that, I have to present you some other things first. You have attended my lectures, my other lectures, probably, and you know that my personal direction of specialization are the constellations. That is why I'm now going to present you some ways of international comparison of constellation astronomies, and then later I will link that to Islamic astronomy. So first we go to Islamic astronomy. I know that you study primarily the moon. And I had the opportunity to join your astronomers during the weekend, which was exhausting, but also very exciting. And was a great pleasure for me to work with you. Um, and on the ship, when we went back to Semarang, then I discussed with some of you, I don't know who joined this little brief round, that there are also Arabic constellations. And they are the so-called, in the Arabic, traditional Arabic concept of, say, a coordinate system or a frame of reference. They have lunar stations. And you all know Stellarium. And Stellarium, you have probably the smartphone app. And there's also a computer app that you can freely download that doesn't cost anything. And there are several sky culture. I will give you a demonstration later, but for now, I want to only show you that this is a whole sky view with the Stellarium desktop version. And you can see we can label it even in Arabic, either translate it to your language or English or whatever, or or in the original Arabic language. And this so-called sky culture was made by a person, a colleague, Khalid from Saudi Arabia. So he really knows the original sources. And we can zoom in here, and I can even give you a better view of the central part. That the lunar stations are really a circle, as you know, a circle surrounding us at the path of the moon, and the central area during the weekend looked like this. So, this is sort of this is a glance of Arabic astronomy, where Islamic astronomy, the later tradition, joined the thank you very much joined the indigenous Arabic tradition that had existed before Islam arrived or was invented, was created. And things like that, like these Arabic original or later transformed Arabic constellations and lunar stations, things like that also exist, of course, in all other cultures, not only in the Babylonian, Egyptian, and Greco-Roman that I have explained enough during the last few lectures, but in other cultures. And now I want to give you an overview about several different types of frames of reference that exist all over the world. And there are different sorts of making these frames of reference and these constellations. For instance, I want to start with a background of the modern constellations and frames of reference, because somebody already yesterday, somebody asked if this is, how could the ancients invent these constellations? They are not recognizable. And then I will get to the different modes on different continents. So first, the modern constellations. The modern constellations have been defined in the 1920s, and in 1930, this so-called Atlas Celeste by the Belgian astronomer Eugène Delporte was created. And in Stellarium, you can see these are the modern constellations. You probably can't see anything. We have to switch off the light again, please. Mm, the Whoa. This is now the real astronomy feeling. You can see the modern constellations here. The equator, the celestial equator, is now in the middle. The North Pole is here. The South Pole is here. And you cannot recognize anything. I mean, you cannot see in the area that is here. You do not recognize a dragon. It's labeled Draco for dragon, but you cannot recognize anything there. It's not a beautiful image that is defined or given there automatically. And even if you zoom in here, okay, the cross may be visible because this was just a tool for navigation. That's simple. But here you do not see Cassiopeia, the queen. A queen here. And you do not see two bears, a large one and a small one here in that area. So this really doesn't actually make sense. Is not recognizable. The ancient roots of these constellations partially have been. And again, the ancient roots have partially been recognizable, as I have described yesterday, because there are some of the Greek original constellations that had been made by imagination, by projection of images into the stars, into the patterns in the sky. So it is definitely possible to see in this pattern of stars, you can see an animal, but you can see something like a fox or a rat, not a bear. Still, the Greeks named it bear due to navigational reasons, because they navigated to the north where the bears live from Greece. So these things are partially recognizable, and also for the Babylonians and the Christian constellations that had been added later, and also then in the early modern times, in the last few centuries, there had been the Dutch explorers who sailed to the south and added new constellations or made ancient constellations longer, wider, whatever. And then some one French mathematician or surveyor who lived in Cape Town for 2 years, he just, he just took a star chart, then drew some lines and said, this is the constellation XY, and it called it somehow without recognizing anything. I mean, a clock or a chemical oven is not recognizable in these stars. So these are the constellations that have been just named without any reference in the visual appearance.
Oke, jadi untuk modern constellation itu mulai tahun 1930-an. Kemudian tidak semua konstelasi itu kita bisa bukan ketahui ya, bisa kita apa ya, recognize lah, bisa kita ngeh, "Oh ini bentuknya ini," kayak gitu. Kemudian seperti salah satunya contohnya, Ursa Major atau Ursa Minor dinamakan Ursa yang artinya beruang. Kenapa? Karena, dia tuh menuju ke arah utara tempat beruang tinggal, bukan bentuknya seperti beruang, seperti itu.
Okay, so this is just a repetition, quick repetition of what I told yesterday and the days before. So sometimes it has been a little bit better in the past with the recognition, but not always. So, but what about the other places on Earth? So, how did, for instance, people in Australia or the peoples in North America define their patterns or name their patterns in the sky? How did they orient? How did they navigate? How did they measure time? And one concept that underlies all these frames of reference is pattern recognition. So, recognizing like the belt of Orion, 3 stars in a row, and recognizing them again and again and again at the same time of the year. And then there are some other concepts that I will get back to later. So, let's have a look at the Earth. For instance, in North America, there are many different climates on from the north to the to the equator in North America. For instance, in the very north, where we have the tribe, the people of the Inuit, formerly maybe have been called Eskimo, but this term is not allowed anymore, so now we call them Inuit. Um, and then further south, in the middle, in the area of the Great Lakes in North America, there are various ethnics that call themselves either Dakota, like the state of the United States, or Nakota or Lakota. These peoples are somehow linked, but they consider themselves as different ethnical groups. But still, they have similar or even the same constellations, and even further south, close to the tropical circle in North America, there are the Navajo in the area of, say, roughly Arizona, California. There live the Navajo, and they are still, again, further south. They have a slightly different view on the sky. And although they all live in the continent of North America, they have a different view, a different concept or different concepts that they recognize in the stars.
Jadi untuk konsep, mengenai rasi bintang itu beliau menggunakan pengenalan pola. Seperti yang bisa kita lihat kalau di North America ini dia dibagi menjadi beberapa, suku, suku Inuit, Dakota atau Nakota, dan Navajo, dan semua suku ini memiliki ciri khas masing-masing untuk mengenali rasi bintang.
And now we go into these details a little bit. Just to give you a glass, you probably know that from the planetarium. If you go to the very far north, similarly, if you go to the very far south, but we don't have peoples there. If you go to the very far north, then the pole in this case, the north pole of the sky, is very high up in the sky, has a high altitude, not as here, as it is close to the horizon for you. But there it is really high up in the sky. And of course, the images that the Inuit projected into the stars were not camels, because camels don't exist in that area. Instead, they have something like elks or these animals that live, reindeers that live high up in the north. In this area of northern Canada, the sort of deer that lives there is called caribou. And that is the central figure here, the caribou, or a herd, a group of caribous, um, the English term caribou is the same in singular and plural for our confusion. Um, so we do not really know if they really meant only one of these animals or more of them, but any caribou is projected into their stars because this is their natural environment. This is what they know from observation of the nature around them. Also, you know that if the pole is very high up in the sky, then the area that is circumpolar, that never sets, that is always visible, is a huge circle in the sky. The blue line here, the dark blue line, is the celestial equator. And the light blue line is the ever visible circle. So everything within this circle never sets for the Inuit. It's always visible as long as they have night. And this is roughly half of the year. And not only do they have the caribou, the deer in the sky, they also have this cute little asterism, which is called the two sunbeams. And of course, these are two stars. Why are they calling two stars the two sunbeams? Can anybody imagine? Well, we are here we are in a region where, as I just mentioned, they have roughly half of the year they have daylight, and the other half of the year they have the night. And that is why in spring, when so typically there is a couple of months where they don't have daylight, where it's completely dark or twilight blue, and they can always see the stars. And then when, say, it's becoming spring, so the spring approaches, then the twilight becomes a little bit brighter. So the two beams of the sunlight that come up now bring the rest of the sun up within the next 2 weeks. So when these two stars become visible, then within the next 2 weeks, the sun will be above the horizon. So this is something that they use for telling the seasons. You can see it in the stars.
Oke, jadi yang sebelumnya ini tentang rasi bintang yang ada di sirkumpolar, di mana di lingkaran itu, terdapat area bintang-bintang yang tidak akan pernah tenggelam ataupun terbit, karena mereka hanya akan berputar di situ selama malam, selama bulan-bulan tersebut itu tidak ada mataharinya. Kemudian seperti yang bisa kita lihat itu di atas itu ada yang namanya rasi bintangnya Inuit tadi. Kalau di daerah lain itu dinamakan camel, unta. Namun karena mereka tidak paham unta itu seperti apa di daerah utara, maka mereka merepresentasikannya sebagai karibu atau tunggangannya anak frozen. Nah, gitu. Ya. Kemudian, selanjutnya ini ada rasi bintang yang sangat unik, yang mana di saat pergantian atau shifting antar musim, dari yang kan kalau di North Pole itu kan dia 6 bulan malam, 6 bulannya siang gitu kan ya. Jadi kan ada shifting tuh antara 2 season ini. Nah, di saat shifting 2 season ini, si matahari kan ada yang namanya fajar. Jadi di saat fajarnya muncul itu ada, serat-serat cahaya, semburat-semburat cahaya yang muncul dan si 2 bintang ini kelihatan. Jadi, eee 2 bintang ini terlihat dari semburat munculnya cahaya matahari tersebut.
Okay, so let's move further south to the area of the Great Lakes, where we have the Dakota, Lakota, Nakota culture. And they have Annette Lee made these wonderful illustrations. She is original from a native person from this one of these peoples, and they make artwork like little pearls connected together. And she used this artwork that they made in order to paint these images for Stellarium. And here you can see we don't have the caribou anymore. We don't have the two sunbeams anymore. We have a completely different culture because we are further south in roughly the area of Northern Europe, same latitude. And here there are some, like a campfire that they see in the arch of Corona Borealis, or other things that they observe in their nature, or like a woman in the great, the Big Dipper is interpreted as a woman, as a pregnant woman that will soon give birth. Moving a little bit more south, oh yeah, that's a beautiful artwork that you can see better here now. Moving even further south to the Navajo in the southwest of America, of North America, there you are roughly almost at the tropical circle. And there you have, of course, a very small region that is circumpolar. You still have an ever visible circle, an area that never sets. But this area is very small here. And these people are very far away from the Inuit. They don't have any. I mean, they have normal seasons as we do in the moderate area. So roughly 4 seasons. Possibly they are on the get into the realm of the subtropical trade wind connection. But for them, the circumpolar area um, bears the belief of their creation myth, because they think that all stars in the sky are sort of the children of two divine beings, maybe not gods, but divine beings, a male and a female. And these two um, divine beings encircle the pole star as a central campfire. And this is the sort of creation area. From there, everything else is created. So here we have a totally different concept. We do not have the strong relationship to the season anymore, but instead we have the creation myth incorporated here into the stars.
Jadi kita makin ke selatan dan semakin kecil lintangnya, itu semakin kecil pula area sirkumpolar yang didapatkan di area tersebut. Nah, kemudian pada daerah sekitar 30 derajat ke bawah yang mana kita dekat sama, apa namanya, tropical, jadi di situ di, sky culture-nya ini, dia di sekitar sirum polar ini mereka itu sering menampilkan, bintang-bintang itu sebagai ruh-ruh spiritual bentuknya, tapi bukan Tuhan, namun ruh-ruh yang ada di sekitar Tuhan itu yang membantu para gods untuk melanjutkan keberlangsungan yang ada di.
Okay, and how do we know all this? Of course, in this case, we have no written sources, we have no books, we have no engravings in stone. We can only ask the people about their family tradition. So what researchers do is going to these people, or in the case of Annette Lee, she really is from these people originally, and she interviews her grandparents, grand aunts, and so on, all the elder people of um, the group, the ethnic. Um, and simultaneously, other people, like normal researchers not from natively from this area, can go there and interview these people. But then we will have the problem that, of course, this knowledge might be 2000 years old, but family traditions don't know what existed 2000 years ago, but only what existed 200 years ago. So there's a little well, not break, but we do not actually know how old these concepts are. For instance, the pole star that I just mentioned for the Navajo, as a central campfire, This pole star is at the northern pole of the sky only since 200 years. 2000 years ago, there has not been any pole star. So if the Navajo then also considered these two, the male and the female divine image, encircling around a campfire, then it was not marked by a central star. So this is a little difficulty here. What if we go to China? And there we have a written tradition in China, and testimonies from China written sources date back to the second millennium BCE, as old as the Babylonian and Egyptian sources. So we do have a rich corpus of material here. And that is also very telling and very interesting. For instance, we have this very famous map that is engraved in marble. So here we have a marble, a huge marble stone, roughly as a little bit taller than I am, um, this size, this huge stone, and you can go close to it. It's on display in a sort of museum in an old temple. You can go there. It's black marble, and then they engraved something, and this is then the white becomes visible, the white stone, and the white makes the stars and the lines and so on. This map, this stone is on display in the Chinese city of Suzhou. That is why it is typically called the Suzhou map. This specific object, this marble thing, dates to the 13th century, which is not really old. It's only 1,000 years old. But the data that has been used to engrave this star chart is much older, at least a millennium older, maybe a little bit more.
Jadi untuk bagaimana caranya kita tahu tentang histori dari rasi bintang itu melalui mulut ke mulut, cerita turun-temurun. Dan kurangnya itu dari cerita turun-temurun adalah kita cuma bisa tahu sekitar kurang lebih 200 tahun ke belakang, bukan 2000 tahun ke belakang. Namun yang uniknya di Cina itu udah ada sekitar 2000 tahun sebelum Masehi, dan hal ini ditemukan di salah satu pura di Cina, dan sudah ada di tugunya itu juga sudah diukir dengan ukiran-ukiran astronomi.
And this map is really telling and really interesting because it preserves a huge variety of assets, of features that have been used in the Chinese astronomy throughout the last 2 millennia, roughly. There are some older maps, not in marble, but on paper, or most cases in paper, maybe displayed on wood or whatever. And this is one of the maps that dates back to the 11th century, Song Dynasty. Yes, I mean, we can all try to pronounce this Chinese term, but I almost gave it up because the intonation, the melody that the Chinese make is so difficult that even if I try to pronounce this term, then probably the Chinese will they will also laugh because I make the melody incorrect. So anyway, this map owned by Susong is say 1,000 years old. It's a little bit older than the marble object. You can see that there are many lines here. That's not only constellations, not only paintings or anything. There are a lot of interesting frames of reference that they used for their astronomy to to really designate a specific position in the sky. They wanted to make it accurate, especially specifically in this time. There was a huge development of scientific instruments, of measurement instruments in China, and they also developed a lot of many new probably methods because they made new star charts every 20 years or so very quickly. So this was a time when astronomy in China evolved a lot. And just to give you a glance, this is the northern hemisphere that or this is one half of the sky that they knew, and the other half of the sky is the map below. The blue line now indicates the celestial equator in this map. And then they do have something like the ecliptic, which is one northern half and one southern half here. And then there is another map that is even a little bit older, dating to the 8th century. Um, it's called the Huang map, but probably also not pronounced correctly. But this map has been found in a scroll in a cave only last century, say 100 years ago. And you can, even now, without really denoting or viewing any detail here, you can clearly see that there are no lines in there, and there's no frame of reference, no grids, coordinate patterns, or anything. It's mere drawings of patterns of stars. Again, pattern recognition. So here are 3 stars in a line, and then you could make a hook and something like that.
Oke, selanjutnya ada Xinjiang File Star Map dari Susong. Dan uniknya itu mereka setiap 20 tahun sekali itu selalu membarui peta bintang. Dan kemudian selanjutnya ada peta bintang dari Dunhuang pada tahun 8 hingga 7 sampai 8 setelah Masehi yang ditemukan di gua dan tanpa menggunakan pola koordinat.
I want to remark that here in this 11th century map, there are also these vertical lines, which are the so-called lunar mansions or lunar lodges in China. And you can see that in the Arabic culture, we have lunar stations, but in the Chinese culture, we have lunar mansions, which are different concepts. And we as researchers who investigate these cultures and compare them, we have the suspect that there might have been any connection between them, these two concepts in the past. But up to now, nobody really found a connection, found a common source of both, or any exchange in, ancient Babylonian time. That's unknown. We just have the suspect that there was some at least exchange, because this is not a transmission, because the constellations are, first, they are different in many cases, and second, the concepts are different, but still there seems to be something, some common source that both of these refer to. So maybe one astronomer had an idea and went to both sides and distributed the idea, and people made different things with that. So this is a section of the Duanhuang map where you can see the northern polar area. And you can clearly see here that that is not only patterns, but the patterns have different colors. And these different colors indicate in Chinese star charts where who had made the constellation. Because in the Chinese Han Dynasty, roughly 2000 years ago, at least 3 older Chinese astronomy schools have been unified, and somebody made something like a common global, so Chinese global, standardized Chinese version of the constellations. And before that, the constellations have been invented or used by different schools in a different way. And for instance, here we have in black the constellations of the Gande school, in red the constellations of the Xishan school, in white the Wuxiang school, and yellow everything else that maybe was in common for all 3 schools or originated from anything else, anywhere else.
Jadi kalau dari peta sebelumnya kita bisa ngeliat garis-garis yang membagi apa peta bintang. Nah, itu sebenarnya kalau menurut Cina itu adalah lunar mansion. Kalau di kita itu seperti manzilah-manzilahnya si siapa? Lunar. Manzilah-manzilahnya si bulan. Nah, si bulan. Kemudian yang ini itu ada dari map-nya itu juga ada warna-warna, tergantung dari mazhab siapa yang menemukannya. Misalnya mazhabnya Ganda atau Shishan dan lain sebagainya.
The Chinese star catalog is almost as old as the Greek star catalog. Han Dynasty is almost the time of Ptolemy and Hipparchus in the Greek area. So you see that there are some parallel developments in both edges of Eurasia. And we can compare these two star catalogs. Here in blue, again, the Almagest Ptolemy star catalog. In yellowish, the Chinese star catalog as preserved from Han Dynasty. And you see that in the Chinese star catalog, there are definitely more stars, but not all stars are given with coordinates. So they are not all given accurately. And if you compare in the x-axis in this diagram, we have the magnitudes, and in the y-axis we have the number of stars per magnitude. And you can clearly see that even for the bright stars, the Chinese had one or a few more bright stars. So this is because the Chinese were a little bit more south and observed some stars that were not visible in ancient Greece in the Mediterranean. The other issue is that the Chinese were much more industrious than the Greeks. They were more busy, and they observed simply more stars in the faint on the faint end of the spectrum. Um, Perhaps, I mean, here I think the identifications are not really certain, but perhaps they even saw some fainter stars than the Greeks. But nevertheless, they definitely were more industrious and listed more stars.
Oke, jadi ini adalah perbandingan dua ini star chart, yang satu punyanya zaman zamannya Ptolemy, dan yang satunya ini yang dari Cina. Dan bisa kita lihat bahwa karena dimungkinkan si Cina ini lebih selatan dibandingkan yang Almagest, jadi daerah Cina ini bisa melihat lebih banyak bintang. Dan seperti yang kita bisa lihat itu yang angka 8 sama bandingin angka 7 itu bahwa Cina menemukan lebih banyak bintang yang terang dibandingkan yang di tabel dari Almagest. Kemudian kendalanya tapi walaupun ditemukan banyak bintang, tapi banyak bintang-bintang itu yang tidak dikenali karena tadi tidak ada koordinatnya. Dan kalau untuk perbandingan, yang bawah X itu adalah magnitude dan yang Y itu adalah jumlah dari bintang.
Okay. So having these background in antiquity, we now can understand the later map. Although it was engraved later, the data of this map goes back to antiquity, to the Han Dynasty. And here, in this huge chaos of lines, I want to highlight the more important lines in order to make you aware what the Chinese astronomers used as a frame of reference. First, you have the ecliptic and the celestial equator. Here, the ecliptic in orange and the celestial equator in blue. So they knew the ecliptic, which means they knew where the moon orbits, because the moon covers stars, occults stars, and this is clearly observable. So they knew this area even before the Jesuits arrived. And then they sort of divided the path of the moon into 29 sections. And these sections along the path of the moon, or a little bit more south and north, are defined by constellations, like the Arabic lunar stations. But they really are used as a as a coordinate grid, as sort of meridians extending almost to the pole of the sky and almost to the southern edge of the visibility in China. So these are these vertical lines in the earlier map from Song Dynasty. And then there is a central area, which is, of course, close to the northern pole. And there, the Chinese had an asterism, which is called the Forbidden Palace, the Purple Palace. That is why I highlighted it in purple. And the Purple Palace is on Earth, is the palace where the Chinese emperor resides, where he lives with all his, servants, his wife, his harem, all his eunuchs, his ministers, and so on. And this is a forbidden area. Nobody is allowed to go there. Nobody of the ordinary people. So, if, for instance, a lady was sold into the harem, then she had to go there, and she was not allowed to leave anymore for the rest of her life. Same with the ministers, with the boys. So this is this purple palace, this forbidden palace on Earth, was projected into the sky in the area next to the pole of the sky, because this was the area that should have been ever visible for the ordinary people out in the countryside, reminding them on their emperor. And then, of course, in this star chart, there also is the Milky Way, and here everything together.
Oke, jadi di dalam star konstelasi ini, sudah ada, apa namanya, bidang ekliptika, kemudian manzilah-manzilahnya tadi ada 29 bagian, yang mana setiap proporsinya itu tidak pas, tapi hanya berdasarkan beberapa konstelasi yang ada di dalamnya, gitu. Kemudian, yang di bagian tengah-tengah itu sirkumpolarnya diproyeksikan sebagai kerajaan terlarang atau kerajaan ungu, yang mana pada zamannya masa Cina kuno itu, setiap orang itu dilarang atau itu sebagai tempat haramnya ini, apa namanya, orang-orang biasa. Jadi kalau misalnya selir ataupun apa yang sudah disuruh masuk ke dalam palace tersebut, masuk ke kerajaan tersebut, jadi mereka tidak bisa keluar dari Forbidden Palace tersebut, begitu.
Okay, so we have the lunar mansions engraved in this map that go back until at least first millennium. I read books that say already on the second millennium the lunar mansions existed, but this is probably not, not every scholar believes in that. For the ecliptic, in many books, it is written that only the European Jesuits brought the ecliptic to China, which is obviously not true here, because this predates the 11th century, predates the Jesuits. But perhaps there have been earlier, definitely there had been earlier exchanges, first with the Arab astronomers, and second with early Christians from Syria, from the Middle East. And instead of the Babylonian concept of the zodiac, the Chinese had their own system of divine creatures to determine the seasons, which is visible here in this map. Here I plotted in an all-sky map. I plotted all the Chinese asterisms with these yellow lines. And you can see the Chinese asterisms or constellations. They sometimes consist only of 2 stars and sometimes 3 stars. Really tiny asterisms. And these tiny asterisms are grouped together in so-called super constellations. And these super constellations here are indicated by the polygons of these divine animals. The green line around the ecliptic is, of course, the range of the path of the moon. This is where the moon really goes. And you can see that the constellations that are used to define the lunar mansions, which are in these polygons, sometimes are a little bit more north or a little bit more south than the actual path of the moon. So this is really not linked to the Babylonian concept where they observed the moon covering stars. But here you can see the red polygon is far south, so that the moon can never cover these stars. So they really made something completely different based on an older concept. Before I go into the names, maybe you want to translate this now?
Jadi kalau di gambaran ini itu untuk Chinese asterism itu biasanya terdiri dari 2 sampai 3 bintang untuk per asterism atau per konstelasi. Nanti dari, konstelasi tersebut digabungin menjadi satu untuk membuat sebuah super konstelasi. Dan terkadang, moon path atau manzilah bulan yang tadi kita lihat, itu dia mungkin condong ke utara atau ke selatan sesuai dengan konstelasi yang ada di Cina ini. Karena mereka pada dasarnya tidak menggunakan aturan dari bangsa Babilonia.
The names of these divine figures are the dark warrior for the dark polygon here in my map. And the dark warrior is a mixed creature, a turtle with a snake. The important thing is the turtle shell here because it is a warrior. And then there is the asterism of the white tiger and the asterism of the red firebird and the azure dragon. And these are the names of these divine creatures that are made out of many of these asterisms that form the lunar mansions. And as visible here in this modern illustration of this depiction here, the central element of the whole sky is the emperor himself, the Chinese emperor. So the emperor is actually depicted twice in the Chinese map. First, we have this central palace around the North Pole, the Purple Palace, and we have the figure of the sort of creator, the legendary, we don't know if he really existed, but a legendary bringer of culture, a legendary first emperor who is called the Yellow Emperor. And he is represented in this constellation, which is a part of Leo the Lion. And then we have the constellations of the two palaces of the emperor himself that reigns on Earth, which is the Purple Palace around the celestial North Pole and the Supreme Palace here in the area of the path of the moon in the middle. And then we have the area for the ordinary people like us, the area of the celestial marketplace. And these super constellations have been very important in the Chinese sort of astrology, which is not zodiac astrology, but it's a sort of prediction. And you probably know that the Greco-Roman astrology had the planets, and the planet in a specific constellation means something. For the Chinese, this was computable and that therefore irrelevant. They knew where a specific planet will stand during the next years. The Babylonians also did. But the Chinese had a different concept for their predictions, which are so-called guest stars. So a comet, like the comet that we now have in the sky, a comet appears in a specific region and then goes through different various constellations. Or there are novae or supernovae flaring up in the sky, a star exploding, visible for a few days or a couple of months, and then vanishing forever, or reoccurring after a couple of years when the star doesn't explode but somehow makes only a surface eruption. And these so-called guest stars have been considered by the Chinese as something like a guest who comes, enters the palace, and then after a while leaves. So it meant something. If a guest star appears in the Purple Palace, then maybe a visitor or a messenger from another state comes, goes to the Purple Palace, meets the emperor, and then leaves after a while. So they made predictions with that. So a guest star in the area in the constellation that represents the people, the ordinary people like us in the celestial marketplace, means that something will happen with the ordinary people, for the ordinary people. And something that a guest star that flares up in the area of the Yellow Emperor maybe means something for, the system of the empire. Or in the Purple Palace, it will directly affect the court and the palace, the emperor or his son or anything like that. So they made predictions with that, with these best stars. They needed these constellations in order to reflect what is going on Earth, on the Earth. On the other hand, they also made their calendar with that. Surprise. So the Azure Dragon is the super constellation which tells them their season of spring. The Dark Warrior represents the winter season. The Red Firebird represents the hot time of the summer, and the White Tiger represents the fall, the autumn. Okay, stop here.
Oke, jadi untuk di Star Constellation ini memang untuk Cina sendiri merefleksikan atau menggambarkan dua jenis area kekaisaran. Yang tadi adalah Purple Palace, yang Palace Purple atau Forbidden Palace, kemudian ada juga Yellow Warrior tadi. Nah, namun semuanya itu tetap apa ya? Tetap ada jalurnya masing-masing dan digunakan untuk memprediksi. Jadi, mereka di dalam kronikelnya di Cina, itu ada sebuah keunikan yang dinamakan guest star atau bintang tamu. Jadi kalau semisalnya nih, bintang tamunya muncul di daerah, Yellow Warrior, berarti nanti ada suatu hal yang akan terjadi di sistem pemerintahan. Kalau semisalnya mereka datang di, area market, tulisan market tadi, atau di tempat orang-orang biasa, berarti akan terjadi sesuatu di orang-orang biasa atau orang-orang seperti kita. Kemudian kalau semisalnya dia muncul di, kerajaan terlarang, daerah kerajaan terlarang, berarti ada suatu hal yang akan terjadi kepada anaknya atau cucunya dan lain sebagainya. Kemudian bintang tamu ini bisa berupa komet, nova, supernova, dan yang lainnya.
Okay, so we have definitely various concepts here, and if we compare the Chinese asterisms, super constellations for the seasons, with those that are used currently in Europe and North America by hobby astronomers, you can clearly see a shift. So the greenish asterisms here, the winter hexagon, the spring triangle, the summer triangle, and the autumn square that we use today on the Northern Hemisphere among hobby astronomers, they are shifted against the old Chinese concept, which means that the Chinese concept has been defined some millennia earlier, of course. Then comparing the Chinese system in earlier millennia, in the second millennium, is a little bit challenging because we have many of the sources strongly related to or deeply rooted in their divine belief or religion, or like these esoteric practices of predicting something, making omens and so on. Like um, they used turtle shells and bones of animals, threw them into a fire, and then they interpreted the cracks of the shell or the bone in order to make a prediction. And then they also engraved some questions into these shells and bones before they threw it into the fire. And this is only a brief statement, a brief, question to the gods or whatever. And it's hard to really derive an astronomy from that. So it may give some hint. We know that they did some astronomy, but it's not really reliable for everything. The modern Chinese culture has, just as an addition here, has a solar year. their year begins in February and, of course, shifts because of the lunar months. And they additionally have an omen system, a prediction system of 12 years, not like the Babylonian concept of 12 months per season, but 12 animals related to different years. And these are not constellations. You cannot find these animals among the stars. They are not visible. They are mere, like abstract, like imagined mathematical patterns that are named, um, because they are based on the Jupiter orbit. Jupiter takes 12 years to orbit the Earth, I mean, to orbit the Sun, but in the sky to go through all the constellations of the zodiac. 12 years for one whole circle. And the Chinese then used these sort of Jupiter position per year to name it after one animal. So Jupiter here means the rat, and Jupiter there next year means the ox, and the next year means the tiger, and so on and so on. And of course, the orbit of Jupiter is not accurately exactly 12 years. That is why the whole thing shifts, and it's not, a specific star pattern, not a constellation. So it's really not comparable to the Greco-Babylonian prediction system.
Kemudian untuk, salah satu gimana ya, kegunaan salah satu dari rasi-rasi bintang menurut mereka itu untuk memprediksi sesuatu. Jadi kalau di masa sebelumnya itu kita bisa lihat, mereka menggunakan pada zaman dulu mereka menggunakan tulang-tulang, kemudian, cangkangnya si turtle untuk memprediksi ya takdir dan lain sebagainya. Jadi kayak di film Indiana Jones itu kalau misalnya mereka masukin tulang-tulang nanti dikocok-kocok abis itu dilempar. Nanti mereka memprediksi, "Oh ini polanya kayak gini, berarti dia yang patahnya di sini berarti nanti hal ini yang akan terjadi." Kemudian untuk di kultur Cina yang modern, mereka itu menggunakan jenis lunisolar dan, mereka menggunakan 12 tahun apa ya, siklus 12 tahun atau yang kita tahu sebagai Shio Cina. Dan hal ini tidak berhubungan dengan konstelasi yang ada di angkasa. Selain itu mereka juga menggunakan Jupiter sebagai, apa namanya, acuannya, sebagai mentionnya. Dan hal ini tidak bisa dibandingkan dengan Greco-Babylonian zodiac astrology.
Okay, so far for the Chinese concept. So the typical prediction systems are not constellations. So still we had in all cases that we considered right now in North America and in China, we had stars connected in recognizable patterns and defining the seasons. There has been a completely different system among many peoples, unconnected peoples of the southern hemisphere, which used actually not stars, the Milky Way, to make a frame of reference and for timekeeping. You Perhaps you have seen the Milky Way, not in Semarang, of course, but if you go to the countryside, you may have seen the something like cloudy appearance. And if you have a really clear sky, which is perhaps not really possible in Indonesia because of the humid climate on the islands. If you have a really clear sky, you can see that this is not only a whitish, milky, cloudy thing, but it has a structure, and there are some dark areas in this Milky Way, in this milky area. This pattern here that I display here has been called the so-called, this is close to the Southern Cross constellation, and it's called the so-called coal sack. It's a very, very dark area in a very, very bright surrounding. So it really strikes the eye. If you have the possibility, this is the first dark part that you can definitely see. It's 5 to 7 degrees in diameter, so it's also a little bit big. It's much bigger than the moon. The moon will never go there, but it's really huge, and the eye can easily recognize it. The Europeans, when they went south, the navigators in early modern time quickly named it the coal sack. This name is preserved since roughly 1500. Um, and this is another photograph of the central part of the Milky Way, the central part of our galaxy, even with colors. And here you can see another beautiful asterism. You can see, probably you will recognize the constellation of the Scorpion here. So here is the Scorpion. I call this the flower because it's visible only half for us. Um, but the Scorpion is easily recognizable, and say for us, for Indonesia, it's really above the Scorpion, more or less as displayed here, a little bit tilted. You have this asterism here of the pipe. This dark cloud is called the Pipe Nebula because it really looks like a pipe, and you even have the smoke coming out of the pipe. Um, And these names, the coal sack and the pipe, are given by modern astronomers because in astrophotography we can clearly depict these star clouds and it's easily recognizable. So this is beautiful, and this is just, as we as humans see the world. But things like that have been used by ancient indigenous peoples in the southern hemisphere, as I said. And there has been a wonderful paper, a summary paper, an overview paper by Galberg, Hammaker, and others, the leading researchers in the field of cultural astronomy, 5 of them, who together made a paper about all these constellations of dark clouds in the Milky Way that have been that we currently know and are distributed around the southern hemisphere. You can see all continents, South America, South Africa, and Australia have these dark constellations. So, going into the detail, the most famous one of them is this constellation from Australia, the so called Emu in the sky. You are all very amused, so I guess you don't need a translation. Um, so, the Australians, in some times of the year, the Milky Way, I mean, in Australia, there is a huge desert and they have a really clear sky. And in some places, in some times of the year, this part of the Milky Way is really high up in the sky, like in zenith. And then they see the constellation, the dark constellation of the Emu here. But they combine the clouds to make the Emu only in the months from March to June, which is their winter. And this is the time when they observe, the Aboriginal Australians observe that the emus outside in the countryside, they breed. The males breed the eggs, and then the young emu babies come out of the eggs. And during this season, this, um, this section of the Milky Way stands really high above. And then they have this constellation. For the rest of the year, August to December, the Milky Way is not like this, but is really close to the horizon. It surrounds the horizon. It lays down, and then the same clouds of the Milky Way have a different name for the Aboriginal Australians. Then they name the same clouds not the emu in the sky, but the two crocodiles. So, yeah, see, this is really what's ongoing in nature. They observe what's ongoing. Sometimes the crocodiles, so in the wet season, the crocodiles come out, and in the or in the winter season, the emus breed. They observe what happens in nature and project what they see in nature. They project into the sky, and so they don't have stable constellations as we are used to them. So the constellation is named different in different months of the year. Going to South America, we have different, I mean, the Inca and other groups, ethnic groups there. Um, and they also have a calendar in among the dark clouds of the Milky Way. This drawing is this painting of the Milky Way. That's a painting according to a photograph of a Milky Way. And this painting was made by an American artist, Jessica Galberg. Um, and then we can easily highlight the darker area of the Milky Way. And here you can see the dark constellation, the dark asterism of the snake. Then there comes the toad or a frog, depending on which ethnic. I mean, sometimes it's a toad, sometimes it's a frog. Um, and then in the coal sack area, and these two, the frog and or the toad and the snake, mark the rainy season because these are animals that live half time in the wet, in the swamp or at the edge of a lake or anything. And then in the coal sack area, we have a specific sort of bird, a specific sort of chicken that is called tinamous, and lives in the Andean mountains. And then we have a huge a llama with a baby llama. Why that? Because when this asterism, these dark clouds are visible in the sky, then the llama babies are born and the mama llamas suckle the baby llamas. So again, what they see in their surrounding, what they observe in nature, this is projected into the sky. And then we have the fox in the area of the winter solstice and another sort of Anden tinamous later on, and then the whole cycle, the whole circle of the year is completed. The fox marks the winter solstice, the December solstice, the summer solstice, um, because then the fox babies are born. So again, like with the llama, um, what they observe in nature, this is projected into the sky. There's the calendar that is visible for everybody also reflects what's ongoing in nature around the villages.
Oke, untuk summary. Jadi, selain rasi bintang, di beberapa daerah itu juga menggunakan Milky Way sebagai timekeeping. Jadi, misalnya ada em, daerah di Milky Way, daerah dark area yang dinamakan coal sack. Kemudian ada yang bentuknya seperti cerutu, pipe. Kemudian untuk di Australia mereka menggunakan Emu constellation dan True Crocodiles constellation yang diidentifikasi sebagai winter untuk March sampai June dan untuk Crocodiles constellation dari August sampai Desember. Kemudian yang untuk di Amerika itu juga di spot beberapa dark areanya dan dikasih nama dan diidentifikasikan masuk ke season yang mana.
Okay, and then we go to South Africa. They also have some dark constellations. This is a beautiful image of the Milky Way in South Africa. If you can easily see here that it forms like a bridge from one end to the horizon to the other. And now, as trained cultural astronomers, you can see the head of the emu here with a beak. And here's the long neck of the bird and the body of the bird. And here you can recognize the pipe nebula with the smoke coming out of the pipe. So after enjoying this image, then going back to the the South African, say, mythology or religion, because for them, for the Zulu at least, in the area of Joburg in South Africa, the state of Republic of South Africa, they considered this area as a huge animal with dark and white stripes. So, like a zebra. We don't know if they really saw a zebra here, but some animal with black and white stripes. So this is also something just like imagination. And the Zulu, Xhosa, Soto, and Tswana, so many peoples in that area, all of them considered the whole arch, the whole bridge of the Milky Way, a street to the afterworld. So, like as we found this or saw this in Plato yesterday, or one of the earlier talks, in the Greeks, they also had the concept that the Milky Way might be a stream of souls that is going around the sky. And when a baby is born, a human baby is born on Earth, then a part of the world soul above us comes to Earth and enters the body of the newborn baby. And whenever a person dies, then his or her soul goes up into the stars again and forms part again of the whole Milky Way ghost street. Yeah, and the same idea we find probably totally unconnected also in South Africa.
Jadi untuk di South Africa, Milky Way itu direpresentasikan sebagai hewan putih dengan, dark stripe. Kemudian di semua etnis itu, Zulu, Xhosa, Soto, dan Tswana, mereka menganggap bahwa Milky Way itu adalah jalan kepada masa setelah kematian. Jadi karena ada kepercayaan bahwa Milky Way itu sebenarnya jalan dari ruh-ruh. Jadi ruh itu tinggalnya di sana dan ada portal yang membuka di Milky Way ada portal yang membuka jalan untuk ruh masuk ke dalam tubuh seseorang di saat orang itu mau lahir ke bumi dan kemudian kalau sudah mati kembali lagi membuka portal yang di sebelah sana.
Okay, so now summarizing how did people make these constellations? Why did they make them? We can summarize that many of the habits used the constellations as a natural calendar. We had the two beams of sunlight and the Inuit. We had the breeding emus in Australia, and we had some, foxes, llamas, other animals being born at a specific season and projected into the stars. So this is one technology method of making constellations to memorize or to predict what will happen next in the year. Then there's also the concept of the netherworld or the afterworld, and maybe souls in the sky. And then, of course, the projection of everyday life, like daily worship, marketplaces, political structures, and so on, that are projected into the stars, and that maybe also have something like a general reminder, like the sun god watches you all, so be brave, be kind, be polite to other people, behave according to the law, because the sun god watches you, or the emperor watches you in the night because his palace is above there represented. So, how does all this relate to Islamic astronomy? Of course, we in our modern religions, we do not have these concepts of ancient deities that watch us anymore from the sky. But what can we do? Islamic astronomy, of course, has developed in the cradle of Islam, which is at the Northern Tropical Circle. If the ancient Arabs made some constellations in this way, that will not apply to you here in the tropics. You have a different climate. You are at different latitudes. The sky behaves differently because you don't have a circumpolar area and so on. So everything is different here. So I think it will be good for you to go and study the indigenous Indonesian cultures. What weather rules did they have? What pharma rules did they have? What navigational tools did they have among the stars? And then relate that to your climate and season because it matches anyway, and relate it to the Islamic culture that is now part of your culture here in Indonesia, and make something new out of this that fits your needs. And then the sky will not be so totally unrelated. The only thing that people in the street can observe is the moon. So, and the constellations are just projections of images that nobody understands anymore, neither in Europe nor here, because you never had this tradition. So I think you have the great chance to study your own cultural heritage or heritages of many cultures in Indonesia and then merge it into the Islamic or whatever modern tradition, as you have different sorts of every different styles of, praying, of holding the hands while praying here and in the Middle East, or as you have different styles of wearing the hijab here and in the Middle East, and so on. So you can also have slightly varying cultural habits in the sky that you can sell for tourists. Going back to the initial question of the future of the future research of Islamic astronomy, and particularly here in Indonesia, I think it should be part of the global concept of cultural astronomy. So, as I said, as I have just reported about these many different constellations, this is just my example because that's my research focus. But there are also, temples and all sorts of buildings, houses, and so on that people have built all over the world and that have some orientation to a solstice, to an equinox, or anything that have some astronomical relation. And cultural astronomy summarizes this all. It started off from archaeoastronomy, actually, things like Stonehenge in the United Kingdom, or the Machu Picchu in Peru, where the Inca built buildings with solar orientations to determine the calendar. And then later, ethnoastronomy, what I just reported about, joined all the sorts of dances, music, traditional habits like preparing a meal or anything like that. And also, of course, constellations that are projections of our everyday culture into the stars. Um, and then also we have modern history of astronomy. And history of astronomy is all the history of the instruments. I mean, this morning I had the great opportunity to visit your lab, and I saw all these improvements that people like you do to instruments like sundials that exist since thousands of years. And I mean, they have a history. These instruments have a long history, a long tradition, and you all continuously contribute to improving them. So this is also part of a cultural development and cultural habits that you have in everyday life. And all this together may be joined with the methods of the digital humanities, like, things like Google Translate that allow us to understand languages that we do not speak, and all sorts of natural language processing, um, all sorts of recognizing images or parts of images. You know that from that you just submit a photograph somewhere and it recognizes the faces. All these things can be used for all the sorts of research in all these sorts of different cultural astronomies. And this is what I want to encourage you to go for, because you, as the future PhD students, you will have these chances to develop these directions. You come from the basement, from the basics of Islamic astronomy, and if you merge all the other cultural aspects of Indonesia with what you know and studied enough from Islamic astronomy, then you will have the great opportunity to create some really new sorts of science of investigation. And I want to give you finally two books that you can rely on. This so called handbook is two really heavy, fat volumes by the great luminance Clive Ruggles, a handbook of archaeoastronomy and ethnoastronomy, published in the famous Springer Publishing House. And this is, you cannot buy it. Even I cannot buy it because it's too expensive. But the university library can buy it or can provide a license, because at Springer also provides PDF, and you can log in with a university account and then just read it, the PDF online. And actually, you don't want to carry it, it's too heavy. So take the PDF. It's really good. And as I said, Clive Ruggles has been the huge, great authority on cultural astronomy. And he did not write everything alone, as he's the editor, but has a huge group of professional authors from all over the world. It's a really good standard work in cultural astronomy. And the second, much smaller contribution is our contribution, where even our dear colleague Yola has contributed, and Mr. Izudin, Professor Izudin. Um, 2 years, 3 years ago, some years ago, I organized a little conference, a meeting at the meeting of the German Astronomical Society, and my meeting was named "Astronomy and Culture: Cultures of Astronomy." And it's not only about modern observatories. This is only one of the many contributions in this book. It's a really thick, fat book, and perhaps it's already available in the library if Mr. Isudin gave his exemplar to his copy to the library. Um, it should be also available as a PDF, and it gives you an overview about many of these aspects that I talked about last week and this week. Different sorts of constellations, the archaeoastronomy like the Machu Picchu and Sudan, graves of that are oriented to the east, west, and somewhere else, and so on, and also of the modern instrument tradition. So these two books I would recommend as a start. When you're searching for PhD topics, then you can get an overview, and then you can get into these, into your own topics and transfer the knowledge. Thank you.
Oke, untuk summary yang paling terakhir, jadi bagaimana caranya kita mengkombinasikan antara astronomi dan Islamic Astronomy, yaitu kita bisa masuk ke dalam archaeoastronomy, kemudian ethnoastronomy, history of astronomy, yang mana salah satu dari mereka ini sudah kita geluti dari awal, mulai kita membuat skripsi, kemudian nanti akan datang tesis dan lain sebagainya. Untuk pendekatannya, beliau juga menyarankan mungkin kita bisa menggunakan pendekatan digital humanity. Jadi kita belum pernah nih untuk di Winoli Songo menggunakan pendekatan digital humanity, yang mana kita menggunakan pendekatan dari berbagai ini ya, literatur, mulai dari digital, kemudian dan humanity. Jadi mulai dari sosial, kemudian budaya sekitar itu masuk ke humanity, dan digitalnya mungkin kita menggunakan alat seperti sebagai contoh dasar translator. Jadi kita bisa mentranslate beberapa bahasa 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 yang sudah di recognize sama translator AI dan lain sebagainya. Kemudian selain itu kita juga bisa nge-attach gambar, nanti dari gambar itu kita, ngeproses bahwa, oh misalnya kita punya gambar star constellation yang lama gitu. Nah kita attach, kemudian di saat kita nge-attach, oh di sini poinnya, ini poinnya, dari sini. Jadi dari situ kita bisa mulai memproses image-image yang ada di, resource atau source yang lama. Kemudian beliau juga menyarankan, buku untuk memulai dalam ini cultural astronomy itu salah satunya adalah punyanya Clive, modul Archaeo dan Ethnoastronomy dari terbitan Springer, dan itu memang buku yang banyak apa ya, kompleks. Saya pernah ini juga membuka handbook-nya, tapi nggak semuanya karena kan ya harus bayar dia, kalau kecuali kita pakai akun institusi, cuman Iwin Wali Songo nggak bisa ngasih akses kecuali kita punya institusi misalnya UGM atau apa baru kita bisa buka. Tapi kalau Uin Wali Songo udah pernah nyoba, nggak bisa buka. Kemudian mungkin kita bisa nyarinya di research academy atau di apa ya, script dan lain-lain academic paper gitu loh. Ya, kemudian selanjutnya beliau juga menyarankan buku yang kedua itu Astronomy and Culture, Cultures of Astronomy yang dibuat itu tahun 2000 mulai 2021 sampai 2022, terbitnya di 2022 dan beliau adalah editor sekaligus kontributor dari buku ini gitu. Oke, kita masuk ke sesi Q&A bagi teman-teman yang mau bertanya, silahkan.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for the time. Mbak mohon bantu di-translate nanti ya, daripada salah-salah saya ngomong. Pertama, my research study for PhD is about traditional calendar in Lombok, kalender lewat Sasak. Kalender ini based on Pleiades star constellation. They have name in tradition is Rawat. Kalender ini sebenarnya tambah season, tambahan to the time season. So yang saya pahami tadi dari ini adalah bahwa kebanyakan tradisi itu menandai dengan benda-benda tertentu. Every culture have their own constellation to mark something in our area. Tapi yang menarik adalah ternyata setiap daerah itu memiliki instalasinya masing-masing. Contoh misalnya di Ghana kita punya bintang Waluku atau bintang Orion. Orion in Jawa, Orion. But in Lombok, Waluku they have star. Jadi banyak bintang yang berbeda. Mengapa demikian? Padahal berarti nggak terlalu jauh. Tapi kita lihat South Asia, oke, gitu kemudian ke Afrika, oke, jauh jaraknya. Tapi ini dekat-dekat kan jaraknya. 1 jam ini nyampe kok. Tapi kok bisa bintangnya berbeda untuk menandakan bukan pergantian musimnya. Jadi saya kami mengenal tentang bintang dengan nama-nama tertentu termasuk tadi. Bahkan kami mengenal ada Pegasus. Pegasus itu kemudian dicelakan atau bahasanya narkoba. Lalu selatan yang satu ini kemudian juga memiliki kaitan dengan Islam karena menentukan hari-hari besar Islam juga. Kedua, dia memiliki fungsi sebagai penentu musim. Yang mana bicara musim biasanya kita pakai kalender matahari. Tapi ini dia pakai kalender hijri, bukan kalender matahari. Sehingga saya bingung menentukan dia yang misal. Sehingga kita hilang sistem. Nah itu aja sih. Terima kasih.
So, ma'am, his 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 research is about the robot Satsa calendar, and the question is the first one: why each culture has a different own name of the constellation, which is means like in Indonesia, but not outside Indonesia. As you know that Indonesia has many island, right? And each island has different name of constellation, and that is the question why. Because if you want to go from Java to Lombok, at least it's only an hour. Why they could have a different name like that? And the second one is we also did research on the Rawat Sasa calendar, and the anyway, and the unique one is this calendar also discuss about the seasonal changing, and the one that we mark the season is not from the solar but from the lunar calendar. And that's why he's still confused whether this calendar is used as solar, or the lunar calendar. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the last one is a very good question, because we all know that the seasons depend on the sun and not on the moon. Um, so actually, I don't know why this comes. Possibly, perhaps they have something like intercalation, that they adjust the lunar calendar every now and then. For instance, the Babylonians had a intercalation, not like we have, like 1 day per 4 years, but the Babylonians had 1 month per every 3 years. Um, because of the 11 days difference of the lunar and solar year, roughly every 3 years, but then they also were not completely regular and so on. I don't know. So this is actually a research question. I would say give this task to a master student, a magister student, because this can. I think that is a question that is somehow specific. It's unique, and you can really maybe more or less quickly find out why this is, and how they used it, if they had a intercalation or something like that. It will give a nice little magister thesis. The other question, um, yes, I mean, thank you for that question. That this is actually something that we are really interested in, with the different islands and the different names. Of course, I don't know why they created different names, because they are simply human, I guess. Um, but I think this is actually something that is really interesting, and that we now that the global community of cultural astronomers now wants to collect. At the beginning of this year, I created this All Skies Encyclopedia, which is an encyclopedia that I now use to start an encyclopedia, or to make online available an encyclopedia of all Babylonian star names and constellation names, because this is my current research focus for the 2 years now, this year and next year. But also, then I hope that if I get funding, we will also do the Greek constellations, and my Chinese colleague does, in the meantime, parallelly does the Chinese constellations. So finally, after a couple of years, we will hopefully have as many constellations as exist on Earth, and names, and all their variations over time. Um, Perhaps maybe I can find a quick idea of this, like the Chinese constellation of Tianfu. And here you can see various Chinese maps over history, and the constellation always consisted of 4 stars. But you can see these 4 stars. I mean, here is a line, and here are these lunar mention lines. And here in this map, the constellation is really in the middle between the 2 lines. Here it crosses one of the lines, and here it is laying something completely different. The orientation of the 4 stars is completely different between these lines. And here it's again different. So all these variations, how astronomers use the names for maybe different stars over the course of the centuries, that is something that we really want to collect here, and to first to collect, and maybe later to evaluate, to judge. And here are all the different identifications of the different stars and patterns. And then we will be able to tell, I mean, if once we will have the collection, so saying Java did it this way, West Java did it that way, East Java did it another way, Lombok did it yet another way, and Bali yet another way. And then we will have the overview, we will have the data material that we can then evaluate, and perhaps will find reasons, connections. Perhaps it's, maybe due to a volcano that just erupted and they changed the constellation, or they changed the name. Or, as I said in an earlier talk, that happened for the constellation of Virgo. The Babylonian Virgo was not a Virgo, not a maiden, but a furrow. And then, after a volcano erupted on the island of Sicily, They increased the cult of a specific female deity that then was projected into the stars. So they never had nobody ever saw the image of a maiden there. It was just because of the increasing of the cult for this specific goddess after a volcanic eruption. And in the case of the Mediterranean, because it's in the zodiac, this image was distributed and then shared among many cultures. But it can happen that something like this happened on Bali, but not on Java, or vice versa. So this can be a trigger for many different names. I don't know. This is a research topic, and probably not only for a magister, but for at least 5 dissertations for the different islands. Yeah, thank you so much. And I also, while you are thinking about more questions, this is the encyclopedia, and this is not the Wikipedia. So not everybody can contribute. Only a selected group of researchers that I rely on have the right to access data here, to access their material. So I have to grant them access. And then, there is Stellarium. And in Stellarium, you have this feature. Okay, I will switch it off in order to show you how I get there. Um, Here we have the constellations, normal constellations that are displayed when you start the app. And then you can also choose, for instance, the Arabic constellations. And these Arabic constellations have been painted in around around 1000. Oh, sorry, this I wanted to leave and this I wanted to switch off. And here you can we dim a little bit the light here? Um, to really show you that these paintings, these illustrations are real illustrations taken from the book. So somebody just, scanned the book and scanned the illustration, then made them standalone images and mapped them into the interactive star chart. And when I now move the star chart or move in here, then the figure remains at the stars. So this was a huge amount of work for somebody, in this case, somebody from Arabia. And a Sufi, as you know, is a scholar who lived roughly 1,000 years ago. But then there had been an original Arabic constellation, set of constellations, indigenous Arabic constellations. Just a moment. You can also switch the language. In my version here now, it's the English translation, so the translated version of the constellation names. But here you can switch to the native version and then you see the Arabic original name. And what I've shown you before, you can also display the lunar mentions like this. You have to switch on the border lines. And there are also other, like the Babylonian constellations. So here you see the source material, which is a piece of clay without any depiction, only text. And with this text, we can reconstruct the images, as I have explained before, or the Egyptian Dendera zodiac. So this object, this relief, was at the roof, at the ceiling of a temple in the Egyptian city of Dendera. And these constellations, I have copied these images here and then mapped them to the stars. And simultaneously, here you have the medieval Chinese star chart that I've just shown, and the Greek, this one, the Greek marble globe in the stellarium map. So all these images, and I would encourage you to make something similar for all the different sorts of Indonesian constellations. So for the Japanese, Bali, Lambang, or whatever. More questions?
Sorry saya akhirnya bertanya lagi. Saya baru sadar ternyata apa yang ada di seluruh dunia ini ternyata Indonesia punya. Misalnya kalau Cina punya Sio, Eropa punya zodiak, kita punya Primbon. Lalu kemudian kalau di luar sana punya penentuan musim masing-masing, kita punya Pranoto Mongso. Kalau dunia punya kalender, kita punya tradisional kalender. Jadi ternyata kita hanya tidak peka saja ya terhadap apa yang kita miliki di samping kita gitu. Dan saya makanya itu akhirnya kalau kemudian keilmuan-keilmuan tradisi tentang astronomi, etnoastronomi yang kami punya di Indonesia ini, kadang itu memiliki faktor yang bisa diganggu-gugat. Misalnya kayak kami menentukan musim di Lombok itu akan 5, 15, 25, 3 tahun sekali. Dan itu berdasarkan bintang Pleiades, berdasarkan Orion seperti di Jawa. Tapi kalau kita meneliti berdasarkan astronomi modern, waktu itu udah nggak bisa digunakan lagi. Muncul di tanggal 5, 15, 25 itu ternyata. Artinya berapa lama keilmuan tradisi ini bisa bertahan di era modern ini? Sudah, masih kan berlaku. Dengan orang akhirnya suka gitu, gitu lagi ininya gitu. Sudah berangkat lama kira-kira.
Okay, ma'am. So he realized that the all over the world cultures, we also have it in Indonesia. So it's like when the others have Sio in Chinese and Zodiac in Babylon and others. So we have Primbon in Indonesia. And then like the agraria culture, the calendar, we have the Pranoto Mongso. And then he know that there are some stick formula for the traditional or the indigenous cultures from Indonesia. It's like one of them is 5, 15, and 25 determination of the calendar using the Pleiades. Then the question is, if then we use the this stick formula to calculate and to calculate everything, then how long this formula could be taken? I mean, he mean that if we just observe the astronomy with the true with the true observation, not using the stick formula, then how could it be? Because it's not suitable anymore for the previous calculation and also this new modern science observation and others.
Do you mean that these sort of calculations rules have been made something like 2000 years ago, and because of precession that doesn't apply? Yeah, well, this roughly also happens everywhere on Earth. It's interesting to know how they did it, and then you can adapt to it. For instance, there are people who think that the Chinese constellation of the Yellow Emperor, this bringer of culture, um, this is a legendary figure, and nobody knows if there was really one, first emperor who claimed, "I am the first emperor." But there are people, European scholars primarily, who think that the constellation was invented in the third millennium because then this area of the sky was really high, of the zodiac of the ecliptic was really at the highest, at the northernmost point, and that is why this bringer of culture must have been at this point when the constellation was invented. Actually, nobody knows if that was really the case. Um, so there are many things like that. Also with the Pleiades, I mean the so-called Plejaden-Schaltregel, the Pleiades intercalation rule, that has been made in ancient Babylon and then also now used as in modern Islam, still used. I mean, there had been at least 3,000 years in between the invention and the modern application. It does not really fit the original purpose, but it still fits. Maybe maybe it fits the other because it's now at the other side of the sun. Um, and so you can still make something with that. At least knowing its origin and its original application, and then applying some offset. This is a minimum that you can always do.
Is there any question?
Excuse me. Actually, it is my another homework, personal homework. Uh, I think I've been looking for a correlation between Borobudur and ancient astronomical tradition in Java, or maybe not a Borobudur temple, maybe another temple on Java. So, in your opinion, what should approaches that should I take to looking this correlation between these two stuff? Thank you very much.
Are you asking for the sort of starting point?
Maybe like method or the approaches that I should take to research this correlation between the Borobudur and the ancient astronomical thing.
Hmm. Um, so first, probably there is some literature about any specific temple. I mean, about the history of the temple, and I would start going from there. I mean, there's probably no astronomy in, but there's something like this and this ruler built this and that temple or arrived at this is that time. I mean, 400 CE or something like that. And I would start with this history, real history, and then from there go to the astronomy of the, for instance, if of the time and of the person. So, for instance, if they say a specific, Indian emperor came here, or Indian priest, or whatever, came here, or monk, and built the temple or introduced a cult or a culture, um, then I would look into the background of this person. Where did he or she come from? Probably he. Where did he come from? How was he trained? And so on. And then, I mean, this temple was then used. The people came from China, from India, from somewhere north of here, and then they built something here and linked it to the local culture, and it existed. So they didn't bring the people from India or China, they did it with the local people from here. So, how did that work? So, why did the people from, for instance, Java accept this person from abroad and their religion, their culture, their habits? What did they worship? And how does that work in Java? So, and if you start asking these questions, then you will find your answers. typically don't bite if you ask questions. Well, if I look at you, I don't know. Maybe I will do. Okay, I think I hope I entertained you a little bit with the many different cultures of interpreting the sky. And I gave you some ideas how to develop your specific research field because I'm frequently asked. I mean, I've been visiting here in 2017, and back then, I mean, this building didn't exist then, and the planetarium didn't exist, and so on. But then, and after my visit, when I was already back in Europe, the professors here kept asking me, how can we connect? How can we publish in so-called Western journals, whatever Western is? I mean, in a spherical Earth, that doesn't make sense. And so, how do we connect to the rest of the world? This is actually the question. Um, and I think it's a good question because if you keep doing the things that are relevant only for a small circle of people here on the island of Java or maybe in Indonesia, then you do not connect to the rest of the world. And if you find possibilities uh, in the framework of cultural astronomy now, I think you have a lot of means to connect to other people and other sorts of astronomy. Maybe not to connect to astrophysics, but who cares? I mean, there are so many astronomies on that planet, and you will find connection if you just go for this new branch. And as I said frequently, this year the International Astronomical Union just established a new commission, Cultural Astronomy, and we are really proud of that because for us, we consider this as a huge step, a giant leap for cultural astronomy, as being recognized on the same level as the traditional history and as the traditional astrophysics. And that is why I think I want to encourage you to develop your style. As I said, I included in my conference volume, I included a contribution by Professor Izzuddin with a former student here, with a bachelor student that I supervised on Islamic astronomy, and another contribution by Miss Yola. And we had these two contributions of mere Islamic astronomy in this volume. But if you find more sort of books like that where you can contribute either what you are doing directly in Islamic astronomy or with a connection of Javanese, Bali, any Indonesian indigenous astronomy, then I think you will have great chances to connect to the rest of the world with your valuable, appreciable contributions. Good luck. Success.
Okay, we think it's enough for the talk. Thank you for your joining and have a nice day. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.